I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here I am. After 8 years of what I thought was a happy marriage, everything fell apart in ways I never imagined. I work in IT consulting, which means I travel about once every 2 months for client installations and training. These trips usually last 3 to 4 days, and until last summer, I had complete trust in my wife. The changes started small. She began going to the gym more often, bought new clothes, and suddenly became very protective of her phone. When I asked about these changes, she'd say things like, "I'm just trying to take better care of myself," or "I want to feel more confident." We had been best friends since college, so I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Our intimate life had changed too. She was less interested, always making excuses about being tired or having a headache. When we did spend time together, it felt different, like she was just going through the motions. I tried talking to her about it several times, but she kept insisting everything was fine and that I was overthinking things. Being in IT, I know my way around technology. After weeks of vague answers and growing suspicion, I decided to sync her phone to my tablet. What I discovered made me sick to my stomach. She had been talking to multiple men, and not just talking. There were messages about meeting up, about times when I'd be away. She was inviting them to our house, the home we had built together. The messages went back months. She had different conversations going with different men, each one more explicit than the last. What hurt the most was seeing her share intimate details about our marriage with these strangers, laughing about how I had no idea what was happening. She even complained about things she'd never mentioned to me, making me out to be some terrible husband who neglected her needs. I'm a planner by nature, so instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to gather more evidence. I installed security cameras in our living room and entry hall, connecting them to my home server. Then I told her I had a week-long training in Seattle. I didn't go to Seattle. Instead, I stayed at a local hotel and watched through the cameras as 3 different men visited our house over that week. I spent my days researching these men. 2 were married with kids, and 1 was even a youth sports coach at the local community center where we volunteered. I found their social media profiles, their wives' contacts, and their workplace information. I saved everything. The videos showed me things I never wanted to see. She seemed happier with them than she'd been with me in months. She cooked for them, something she'd stopped doing for me, saying she was too busy. She laughed at their jokes, touched them the way she used to touch me. It was like watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. After returning home, I acted normal for 3 weeks while planning my next move. I helped with groceries, watched TV with her in the evenings, and even went on walks together like we used to. I wanted to see if she would show any guilt, any sign that she regretted what she was doing. But she acted completely normal, kissing me goodbye in the morning and texting me sweet messages during the day, all while planning her next meetup. Then I told her I had an emergency client meeting in Denver. She seemed excited about having the house to herself, saying she might invite some girlfriends over for wine night. I had already seen her messages planning to meet someone new. This time, I drove to the airport, checked in, but took a taxi back home. I arrived just as she was getting ready for another girls' night out. The look on her face when I walked in, I'll never forget it. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, one she definitely hadn't worn for me. I showed her some of the footage and messages. She broke down, begging for another chance, saying she would change. She claimed she didn't know why she did it, that she felt lonely when I traveled, that it didn't mean anything. She swore I was the only one she truly loved. Against my better judgment, I agreed to try to work things out, but with conditions. She had to write down everyone she had been involved with, attend marriage counseling, and cut all contact with these men. She agreed immediately, probably thinking she'd gotten off easy. I spent the next few days making my own plans. I confronted each of the men individually, showing them clips of their visits to my house. I made it clear, if they ever contacted my wife again, their families and employers would see everything. They all agreed to stay away, though one tried to argue that his marriage shouldn't have to suffer for a mistake. For almost a year, things seemed better. We went to counseling, started having date nights again, and even planned a vacation. The counselor talked about rebuilding trust, about open communication, about how affairs often happen because of underlying issues in the marriage. I nodded along, played my part, but what my wife didn't know was that I could still access her messages. I wanted to trust her, but I also needed to verify. Then it started again. New messages, new photos, and plans for another meetup while I was supposed to be at a conference in Portland. This time, I waited in my car down the street and watched a man I didn't recognize enter my house. I gave them 10 minutes, then went inside with my phone recording. I found them in our bedroom. The man ran out, and my wife started crying, begging for another chance. This time, I was done. I told her she had 48 hours to tell her family and friends what she had done, or I would do it for her. I tracked down the new man's wife and sent her the evidence. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, started calling and texting nonstop when she found out I had contacted his wife. She begged me to stop, but I wasn't going to. I showed everything to my closest friend Mike and his wife Sarah. Mike suggested I just move on, but Sarah thought I should expose everything. Mike had always been the practical one, telling me to take the high road, while Sarah believed in karma. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let my wife twist this story and make me look like the bad guy. After years of lies and betrayal, the truth needed to come out. I had given her a second chance, something many people told me was a mistake, and she had thrown it back in my face. Now she would have to face the consequences of her actions. When I dug deeper into her messages, I discovered there were 6 men in total, not just the 4 I knew about. 2 of them were one-time things when I was away on longer trips. Reading through everything, I realized the first guy she cheated with was actually one I had on video. I decided to send evidence to all of their wives. One of the wives called me back within minutes of receiving my message. She had questions about everything: dates, times, messages. She told me she had suspected something was wrong for months, but could never prove it. She thanked me for giving her the truth she needed. It felt strange being thanked for delivering such painful news. The newest guy, the one I caught in my house, didn't take things well. His wife kicked him out after seeing the evidence, and apparently, he got into some trouble with the police for getting violent at home. He tried calling me, making threats, saying I had ruined his life. I blocked his number and saved the voicemails for my lawyer. My wife kept calling and texting, but now it wasn't just about saving our marriage. She was worried about what would happen when everyone found out. She begged me not to tell her parents, saying it would kill them to know what she had done. She was more concerned about her reputation than about how she had hurt me. I made my wife write out a complete timeline of her affairs. It was hard to read, seeing everything laid out like that. Some of these affairs had been going on during times I thought we were happy, holidays, anniversaries, even during the week we went to my parents' anniversary celebration. She had been messaging these men while sitting next to me at family dinners. Her best friend kept calling me too, swearing she never knew anything about the affairs. But I had proof she was lying. There were messages between them where my wife shared details about her adventures, and her friend encouraged her, even helped cover for her sometimes. I sent screenshots of these conversations to her husband. They separated shortly after. I stayed in a hotel for a few days while my lawyer drew up divorce papers. When I came back home, my wife was already there, waiting. She had been served the papers that morning and wanted to talk. She said her life was falling apart. The pastor's wife had asked her to resign from her church committees. Her affair partners were angry with her because their lives were being disrupted. Her best friend wasn't speaking to her anymore because her own marriage was in trouble. I asked her if she had told her family yet. She hadn't. She had only told a few close friends, and I'm sure she gave them a very different version of events. I reminded her that she had limited time before I would start reaching out to people myself. She tried again to convince me we could work things out, saying she still loved me. That's when I told her something I had been holding back. I explained that I had access to every email, text, and message she had sent over the past 3 years. I knew about every conversation, every picture, every video she thought she had deleted. I had read messages where she complained about me to these men, where she made fun of me, where she planned their meetups while I was working to support our life together. I told her there was no way I could ever trust her again. Without trust, there could be no marriage. The person I thought I married didn't exist. Maybe she never did. The only thing left was to divorce and go our separate ways. She tried to argue, but I was done listening. I had already contacted multiple lawyers and chosen one who had experience with cases like mine. My lawyer advised me to document everything and avoid direct contact with my wife as much as possible. He said the more evidence we had, the stronger our position would be. Since my wife hadn't told many people yet, I decided to take control of the narrative. I put together all the evidence, text messages, emails, the timeline she wrote, videos, everything, and created 2 separate packages. One went to close friends and family with a detailed explanation of what had happened. The other went to the wives of her affair partners. I included a warning to other wives about how my wife specifically targeted married men. I wanted them to be aware in case she tried to stay in touch with their husbands. I also gave my friends permission to share the information. I knew it would spread quickly, but that's what I wanted. The truth needed to be known. Within hours of sending everything out, both our phones started blowing up. My wife was furious, saying I had no right to share our private business with everyone. I asked her what part of what I shared wasn't true. She had no answer for that. She moved out that night, either to her sister's or her parents' house. I didn't care which. The man from our church who was involved had to leave the congregation. His wife made him quit his job and move to another state. She wouldn't give him a divorce but used their kids as leverage to control him. It was messy, but I felt no sympathy. He had made his choices. My wife had to resign from all her positions at church. Most of her church friends stopped speaking to her. She hasn't been back to any services since everything came out. Some people criticized me for exposing everything so publicly, saying I should have handled it privately. But the people who mattered understood why I did it. These affairs had happened in public spaces, my house, our church, our community. The truth deserved to be just as public. The aftermath of exposing everything was intense. My lawyer had warned me about possible legal issues with sharing the videos and messages, but he helped me handle everything carefully. One of the men tried filing a revenge porn complaint, so I had to meet with the district attorney. After reviewing everything with my lawyer present, the DA decided not to pursue any charges. The same guy then tried to sue me in civil court. He claimed I had ruined his reputation and career. The trial was short. The jury sided with me after seeing the evidence and hearing how he had knowingly entered my house to sleep with my wife. His lawyer should have advised him better about taking this to court. My wife didn't handle the public exposure well. She lost most of her friends and her standing in the community. She tried dating again, but made the mistake of getting involved with our friend Tom's girlfriend. It was like she couldn't help herself. She had to chase after people who were already in relationships. When Tom found out, that was the last straw for the few friends who were still talking to her. She ended up moving to another state. The divorce proceedings went smoother than expected. My lawyer was excellent and had seen cases like this before. We reached an agreement where my wife got half of our liquid assets and some of the house equity, but she couldn't touch my retirement accounts. I let her keep all the bedroom furniture. I didn't want anything that reminded me of what had happened in that room. I sold our house, couldn't stand living there anymore with all those memories. Found a new place across town, closer to work. It's smaller, but it's mine, and no one has ever betrayed anyone there. Moving was like therapy in a way. I got to decide what to keep from my old life and what to leave behind. Some friendships surprised me during this time. People I thought would stick by me disappeared, while others I wasn't that close to stepped up to help. My neighbor Dave, who I'd only really known from occasional chats while mowing our lawns, helped me move and introduced me to his poker group. Those weekly games became my lifeline during the worst months. Mike and Sarah, my friends who had different opinions about exposing everything, stuck with me through it all. Sarah organized a guys' night out when I was at my lowest, and Mike kept checking on me, making sure I was eating properly and not just surviving on takeout. Their support showed me what real friendship looks like. Work was another surprise. I was worried about how all this drama would affect my job, but my boss was understanding. He adjusted my travel schedule for a few months while things settled down, and my coworkers covered for me when I needed time for lawyer meetings. It helped that I had always been reliable. People are more willing to help when you've built up goodwill. The hardest part was dealing with the trust issues. Every time I thought about dating again, I remembered all those messages I'd read, all those times I'd been lied to. My therapist, yes, I finally started seeing one, helped me understand that what happened wasn't about me. My wife's choices were her own, reflecting her issues, not my worth as a husband. Therapy also helped me deal with the anger. I had so much of it at first. I was angry at my wife, angry at the men she was with, angry at her friends who helped her hide everything, even angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Learning to let go of that anger was crucial. It was eating me up inside, affecting my sleep, my work, my friendships. About 6 months after everything happened, I ran into one of the wives, the one who would thank me for telling her the truth. She was doing well, had divorced her husband, and started her own business. She told me her kids were adjusting, and while it was hard, she was happier knowing the truth than living with lies. That conversation helped me realize I had done the right thing by exposing everything. My ex-wife tried to contact me a few times after she moved away. She sent emails saying she was in therapy, that she understood now why she did what she did, that she was truly sorry. I never responded. The time for apologies had passed, and I had no interest in helping her feel better about what she'd done. One of her affair partners tried to reach out too, wanting to make amends as part of his marriage counseling. I blocked his number. I had no obligation to help any of them deal with their guilt. They had choices, they made them, and now they had to live with the consequences. A year after the divorce was final, Mike's wife Sarah introduced me to her coworker Rachel. She was also divorced, but for different reasons. Her ex-husband had gambling problems. We started slow, just coffee at first. I was upfront about my trust issues, and she understood. She had her own walls up from her marriage. Rachel was different from anyone I'd dated before. She was direct, honest, sometimes brutally so. No mind games, no hidden messages. If something bothered her, she said it. If she needed space, she asked for it. It was refreshing after years of trying to read between lines and decode hidden meanings. We've been dating for a few months now, taking it slow, building trust gradually. My therapist says I'm doing well, dealing with the past without letting it control my future. Rachel and I have rules about phones. They're never face down, never locked from each other, but we also don't check them. Trust is a choice you make every day. Looking back, I don't regret exposing everything. Some people called it revenge, but it was really about truth. My ex-wife had carefully created an image of herself as the perfect wife, active church member, loyal friend. She used that image to manipulate people, to hide her affairs, to make herself look better than she was. Exposing her affairs wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about ending the lies. The karma that followed wasn't my doing. Her affair partners' divorces, her lost friendships, her having to leave town. Those were all natural consequences of her actions. I just removed the curtain she was hiding behind. What happened after that was up to her. I'm in a better place now. The new house is feeling more like home. I have a strong circle of real friends. Work is going well. I even got promoted last month. Rachel and I are talking about taking a vacation together. It's not the life I planned on having, but maybe it's the life I needed. Sometimes I think about what I would tell my younger self, the me from 2 years ago who thought he was in a happy marriage. I wouldn't warn him about what was coming. That pain, as horrible as it was, led to growth. I'm stronger now, more aware of who I am and what I deserve. I know what real love and loyalty look like, and I won't settle for less again. The last time I heard anything about my ex-wife, she was working at a real estate office in another state, starting over. Good for her. We all have to rebuild sometimes. I hope she's learned from what happened, but that's not my concern anymore. My story isn't about her now. It's about me, about healing, about finding happiness again. And in that story, I'm doing just fine.